Only in America.
Only in America.
Only in America.
Only in America.
Only America.
Only in America.
This week, something really, really special. I had the privilege of speaking with two veterans of the war in Afghanistan who worked relentlessly to help Afghan allies get out of the country since the fall of Kabul. For Afghans, the evacuation meant freedom. For Matt and Rick, the evacuation means honor and healing.
There's just so many people that supported this mission, and they need support all over the world. And there are a lot of them in our backyards now. And the best way we can honor, or maybe the only way we can honor this failed mission, is to make something right of it. And one way we can do that is to honor these people, to help them get on their feet, to help them live a life. Or else, what the hell was all of it for?
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Nirani, and this is Only in America. So, these past few weeks, we've heard from incredible organizations that are working to welcome newly arriving Afghan evacuees. We've talked with community organizations and advocates who are mobilizing to welcome Afghans into their cities and towns. And the thing is that all of this is taking place against a very stark backdrop, because tens of thousands of Afghans are still overseas at military installations hoping that their applications will be processed. And there's an untold number of Afghans who are still in the country hoping to get out of danger and get out of Afghanistan. Matt Carpenter and Rick Stockberger bring a personal urgency to the evacuation. They both grew up in Northeast Ohio, and as members of the Army National Guard, they both served in Afghanistan. There, they trained, worked, and fought alongside Afghan nationals who were working to help the U.S. military in the hopes of building a more democratic Afghanistan.
We were embedded trainers, so kind of combat advisors, and our job was to specifically live on an Afghan army base, train, advise, and assist the Afghan National Army forces so that when they would go out and do combat operations, or really any type of military operation, whether it be in garrison or in the field, our job was to be there with them and to kind of monitor as things were going on and then provide input or even direct fire airstrikes, things like that, if things got out of hand. And that did happen a lot. But the way that we got so, involved in this is that our mission required us to become very close to the people around us, the Afghan nationals, both the Army, sometimes the National Police, but not quite as much. But the overall scope of the mission was to embed and, really to become pretty ingrained in the culture. And the reality of that is that we had to. I mean, you have to build rapport and establish relationships, and it has to be a working relationship, or else the entire mission doesn't work. And we saw examples of that in Afghanistan where there were blue on green attacks or green on blue attacks. And we saw the tragedy of that. Well, thankfully, in our mission, we never had any of that. But this whole mission just brought us very close to different Afghan people from all different walks of life.
So there was about 23 Americans, 23 Hungarians, and between 200 and 400 Afghan National Army soldiers on this base. And so, as Matt said, we lived with, slept with, embedded with, and patrolled with, and trained with. And so, we would go out and on combat missions with the Afghan National Army with our interpreters by our sides. And there was many times that communication is hands down the most deadliest weapon on the battlefield. And if it wasn't for our interpreters who wore an American flag on their shoulder, very much at the promise of being able to vote, which we got to witness the election, not witness, but partake in the elections in 2009 in northern Afghanistan, which was some of the first free elections they had seen in a very long time. And also our unit saw more combat that day than the rest of the entire country, and our small unit of 23 guys. So, it was a very harrowing season for us. And, we were very fortunate that none of our Americans or Hungarians were badly injured, but we've lost several Afghan National Army soldiers, and our interpreters were by our sides while rendering first aid and fighting alongside these guys. So it's important to note, I think, that they fought alongside of us. They talked beside us when we were in combat. There was an interpreter who believed in what America had to offer next to me.
Their experience in Afghanistan led to friendships, and just like any of us check in with our friends, when Matt and Rick returned to the U.S., they stayed in contact with the people that they met and worked with in Afghanistan, building lifelong bonds that would prove to be life-changing.
It was always, birthdays and just random checking in. Occasionally something would pop up on a timeline or something, and I would, shoot a message over to one of my guys, and we just kept in contact like we would with anybody on Facebook and the different social media apps. I mean, that's the thing that it's brought us close together in this regard. I mean, after Vietnam, everybody kind of just got to turn away from it. But with this, we're all still very connected to people that are in Afghanistan, even right this moment. Gotten a couple of messages since we've sat here, so it was mostly just checking in. But then there were the other things too. And I noticed that this had been increasing, obviously, over the last couple of years. But anytime there was an attack in Kabul, we knew our friends were there. We would always check in, how are you doing? Hope everything's okay. And so that was pretty common. And then this summer, it was an entirely different checking in conversation. It was all, for lack of a better phrase, all hell was breaking loose, and we could see that taking place.
But when President Biden announced the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, things took a turn for the worse.
By August, it was, when Spin Boldak fell and Kandahar fell, it was like, all right, the writing's on the wall. This is a done deal. It's just a matter of when and not if now. And then our friends all, Rick got similar messages. I'll let him talk about them, but I've posted a few of them, and they were all, we're going to die. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of where it was. We're going to die, and my kids are going to die. And, we need help. And where's that help going to come from? And for me, there was a good 2 or 3 days where I just felt completely powerless and hopeless. And I don't know if I've ever been that low in my life where it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to turn to. It was a really tough time, but those were the kinds of messages that brought us here. It was just because we were friends with them. It's tough to really explain this relationship, but you can go back and see it documented forever in history. When people go to combat together, they become very close. We've always focused on people going to combat together as just being American soldiers or whatever army they fight by. But what we don't often remember is that in almost every one of these cases, especially in modern history, we have host national forces that are there partnering with us, doing it all. But, we got to go home after this. They just kept going right back into the fight over and over and over and over again. And my one good friend that I'm trying, and this was the person that you put me in contact with, a friend of yours, he started serving with ISAF when he was 17 years old. And that didn't end until June of this year, when he basically pulled the plug on it himself and said, I'm leaving, I'm getting out of here because this isn't going to work. And so he was a little bit ahead of it. But, these are stories that you could just find over and over and over again. We're not unique in this aspect. There are a lot of veterans that kept in contact with these people. And it's just because it's so much easier for us to do that. We didn't lose contact when we came home. And a lot of that is because that's how important they were to us.
They saw that their allies in Afghanistan were facing a life or death situation. So Matt and Rick took matters into their own hands. Over a harrowing few weeks in August, Matt and Rick worked swiftly to evacuate over 150 people from Afghanistan, many of whom were interpreters, but also many were women and children looking to escape. Here's how they describe those 2 weeks and the emotional toll that it took on both of them.
They were hell. As we were basically turned into me having, and Rick and all of us having to go to our family members and say, hey, look, I'm going to be here, but I'm not going to be here because I'm for lack of a better words, and we'd be running a military mission on top of life and managing our family and everyday responsibilities. So for 2 weeks, we pretty much put ourselves into that mindset where it was 1 or 2 hours of sleep a night because we had to communicate at night. That was the most effective time because of the time difference. And, trying to go, like for me, I was starting a brand new year of school. So it was my first week with new middle schoolers. So for 2 weeks, we pretty much went into full on panic. But the reason for that is because the weeks before those 2 weeks, we were already in full on panic. We just managed to, at the right time, we managed to realize like, oh, hey, I'm working on the same thing Rick's working on. And along the way, we picked up a couple of other people who were also doing this, and we're all connected to one another. It's just that, in the fog of it all, we weren't really connected yet. We got there, but we were able to really hit a home run because we have a lot of foreign friends and international partners that it turns out are able to do a lot, to the tune of getting a Hungarian special forces team into Kabul to get our guys out. But, those 2 weeks were terrible. It was stressful beyond belief. It was up and down, constant thinking we had the problem solved, and then seeing it start all the way back to square one, getting our people on a flight manifest. We did that I think we had that done a week before it all worked out.
Yeah.
6 days.
Getting him a seat on an airplane out of Kabul, we thought that was it. It's done. We did that in 3 or 4 days.
Like the football. And then 6 days later, we're still trying to get them into the gate. And that's the story that everybody ran into. And you've seen the pictures, I'm sure. We have plenty of them. It just wall to wall mass of people. And many of those people had manifested flights and had people on the other end of those gates waiting on them, but they had absolutely no way to get in there. And for us, it was, inshallah, but for us, we got in right before all the really bad stuff happened. And, it was right at that exact spot that our people were able to get in. But those 2 weeks, it really is just, it's hard to describe just how terrible that really was. It was horrible, to be honest with you. The stuff we were receiving, the pictures, the videos, the voicemails, the audio. I mean, we got to the point toward the end where it was like, I've said this in many of these talks, but I really did get to a point where toward the end, those last few hours, even those messages, they would come in, and on Facebook, you actually have to push play. And I can remember sitting there and just staring at that message for a good minute or two, thinking I can't do this anymore. I can't push that button. And just knowing that I didn't have a choice because people on the other end were dependent on what we were going to hear and then what we were going to say to them. And that went on for 6 days. It just kept getting worse and worse and more violent. And, the things that you all were hearing in the media back here were terrible. And we saw it. We would turn on the TV and see it too. And it's just, and we were thinking, and we were always talking about if they only really knew how bad it was being sugarcoated. And just be honest, that's what's happening right now. If what we knew and what we're seeing and hearing was all over the TV and all over CNN and the big media outlets, I think the world would be having a different viewpoint of this right now.
It was hard. I have post-traumatic stress disorder from serving in Afghanistan. And, I deal with that on a regular basis. And so all of this, brought that right back to the forefront of being in the fight. As Matt said, he was starting a new week of school. I'm the CEO of a business incubator and I help energy companies, create new clean technologies and whatnot. But, I'm also a father and a husband, and I was coaching my 5-year-old son's flag football team. And, I'll never, ever forget the moment on a Sunday, the day we actually got them through the gates. But, I handed my wife, who had, after a week of, why are you on the phone every minute of every day, and me not wanting to share what I was doing and being like, I guess I have to tell her because she's got to think I'm cheating on her at this point with something, because I am just on my phone nonstop and not sleeping and all of that. And so, I brought her into the fold because I needed support and somebody to talk to. But during that game, I was on the sideline and I handed my wife my cell phone and with the Facebook Messenger open. And I was just like, don't say anything to this group, but I need you to monitor this. And if somebody dies or they get into the gate, I need you to come get me off the sideline. I need you to come down and tell me. That's how real this was for us. And also going through our everyday life, putting on our dad face and cheering for kids and, helping them excel and all of that.
And I want to add something. Can I just real quick? You said that we were trying to put on our faces, our dad faces and our family faces and go through that. We're still doing that. We just have gotten better at it a little bit. But We've luckily found more people to help us, but that part is not really stopped a whole while.
As they helped people get out of Afghanistan and process through the U.S. immigration system, they faced even more obstacles. Now, this wasn't the first time that Rick had dealt with our broken immigration system, but for Matt, the bureaucratic dysfunction was stunning.
Frankly, I was shocked at how much of a almost impossible task this is. I'm a fluent English speaking person, and I can't navigate these forms, and the process is almost impossible. Now, most of these people are having to do this in the English language. All the forms I've ever seen are in English, and they're impossible. Like, here's a scenario. If you're in northern Afghanistan and your SIV process gets, I don't know if rejected is the right word, but there's a problem with it, and you get that 120-day period to appeal it, which happened to several of our friends. One of them I can think of very specifically here. And you can't get to the embassy in that 120 days because of mission. All of a sudden, the entire thing is done. It starts all over again. I know for certain that happened to more than one of the people that we're trying to help. And it got to the point for several of them where it was just like, what is the point of this? I do this. I go through a years-long process. I go through the interviews, and then there's a piece of paper that's messed up somewhere. And then I have 120 days to come in and appeal it. Maybe I didn't find that out until 50 days into it because I'm in a crazy northern Afghanistan mountain range that I can't ever get anything from anybody. And then I've got 70 days or whatever's left over, 80 days to get there, and I can't. They ran into mountain after mountain of roadblock. And that seemed like that's what they found. What they didn't find was support ever.
So to better organize and resource their work moving forward, they've launched a nonprofit organization to help their Afghan allies.
It's interesting talking about the bureaucracy of the immigration system. There's plenty of bureaucracy to go around of things that are hard to do. When we were in the thick of this, we set up a GoFundMe because, there was about 150 Afghan interpreters and families and all of that we were able to get through the gates and get on planes to head to Hungary. And we knew that they were going to need, more help. These folks were nurses and interpreters and had things, houses, cars, they had a life that they had built. One of the things that I go back 1,000 times to was the last night, one of our interpreters, his daughter had gotten trampled and he took her to the hospital and, spent his last dollar on earth to get her care and to fortunately get a taxi back to the gate. And so thinking okay, with these guys, these people are going to need help with the SIV process. They're going to need, basic food, money for food. We don't know what Hungary is going to have for them when they get there. Are they just going to be in a refugee camp? How can we help? And so we set up a GoFundMe, jumped through a lot of hoops, even on the GoFundMe side, because frankly, there had been a lot of fraud on people saying they were getting money for, Afghan refugees and all of that and, taking it. And so, GoFundMe vetted us and all of that. So that took, a long time, even though we had quickly raised about $15,000, couldn't do anything with it. And then, we were like, oh, okay, well, we can just pull this money out and start sending it. And no, because you intermingle that with your personal bank account. Matt found out everything will shut down. They will just lock all of your facts and just for fraud and everything else. You don't want to intermingle your personal finances with a GoFundMe campaign and do all that accounting. And then so we decided, okay, well, let's just go get a separate bank account for this. Well, lo and behold, you can't just get a second bank account. You have to attach it to something. Okay, you need a business. All right, let's go make a business. So we, established a nonprofit called Veterans Enduring Freedom. Obviously, a bit of a play on words of Operation Enduring Freedom. Where we the mission that we served on in Afghanistan, and it's focused on helping veterans and allies of the United States with anything that they need when leaving Afghanistan. Whether that's helping interpreters get on their feet, refugees get on their feet, or veterans that are dealing with PTSD. And so, we established that, and we're after figuring out how to send wire transfers and all of that have finally today, we got confirmation that some of those funds were received on the other end of the world. And there's a couple families that, are safe now. And because of that funding, and they will be taken care of for the next 6 months and get through the winter in Afghanistan. And, there was no better feeling than seeing that come through.
Because ultimately, they realize that the evacuation is far from over. Matt shared with me what he has learned about the current situation at military bases where Afghans are waiting to be processed, all of which underlines the need for a more long-term, permanent solution to the legal status of Afghans who were evacuated.
Their cots are on top of one another. There are people that are in there that are separated from families or by themselves. There was a measles and cholera outbreak in Ramstein right now. They're not good. I think I read somewhere one of my colleagues was saying that they're getting one meal a day, one cooked meal, and the rest are MREs. They don't have the ability to charge cell phones. There's not enough power stations there, so they can't communicate with each other. Even when they get to some of these places, they don't have access to an embassy to complete the process, so they're just stuck. They're really, really not good, and they're overcrowded. There's reports of sexual violence. There's just bad reports all around. We're taking people out of a bad situation and putting them into another bad situation with an uncertain path to where that even goes. That's not really I don't think that's really being talked about. What we are celebrating is getting people out, but they're not really talking about what that means when they get out.
And remember, the situation in Afghanistan remains extremely dangerous for those left behind.
People are scared. People are terrified of what's going to happen daily. There are night raids all of the time, especially in the bigger cities. There is the uncertainty of what's going to happen when winter sets in within the next, any time, basically now at this point, it can start getting to that point. There's very little food coming in. There's already droughts in the South. What was it? The number was the United States was given $30 million or something like that a day to Afghanistan over the course of 20 years. And that number is zero now. How do you make up that budget? How's that even possible? And there's no help coming. There's obviously no good answer here, but what's being reported is very, very lax at best. And it seems to us like everybody that can do something about this just wants this to conveniently go away. We should be helping people who fought a U.S. war for 20 years. We should be helping them. Or supported it. Maybe they didn't fight. Maybe they're prosecutors or Supreme Court justices or women that went out and promoted women's rights. Because I'll be honest, one of the people that one of our friends that we're working with works for the Max Planck Foundation. There's an international rule of law, and just saw the messages come across where she reminded me, because I told her we were going to be speaking with you tonight, and she knew your reputation, had great things to say about you. One of the things that she was very adamant about me bringing up was all of the people that supported our mission that were not directly combat related. They were those prosecutors and those judges and women that were going out and investigating and prosecuting domestic violence. In Afghanistan, it's crazy to think that was happening, but it was.
Now, as important as the evacuation is, the resettlement process presents another set of challenges, both for the community welcoming Afghans as well as the families themselves. So we talked about how communities should feel about Afghan families moving into their neighborhood.
I would say they should be honored. This is a very honorable culture. If you turn on the TV and you see all the violence right now, it's going to be hard to see what we saw, which is an honorable people who really genuinely care about one another, care about us, care about others, and who want the same things we want. They want a chance to raise their kids somewhere where they're safe and they can have an opportunity to get ahead in an education. And we all really want the same things. It's just they come from a different part of the world where things are done a little bit differently. But, I would say to the people in Northeast Ohio that they're your new neighbors and they're going to need a lot of help. And to the people in those communities that have an ability to start planning for that, you're going to need translators. You're going to need people that speak Pashto. You're going to need people that speak Dari, Persian, all of it. You're going to need people that can help these people to get resettled, or else the cycle is just going to continue. And we're going to have problems over and over again where people don't feel fit in. They don't feel like they fit in. They are alienated from the community. And it's going to continue to create wedges instead of building bridges. These are professionals. A lot of these people had lives, like they were established people, they were respected in their communities, and now they're going to go and start where, with what? We know for sure that the people that we helped came out of Afghanistan with nothing. Maybe a bag. They didn't bring their diplomas or their resumes or CVs and things like that. They're starting over completely with nothing. And I don't know that most people can ever really fathom what that might be like. And for us, we've seen it. I still can't fathom what that is. I'll hopefully never have to experience that. And most people won't. But they've left everything. Their homes are going to probably be occupied by a Taliban. Their possessions are who knows where. One of my good friends told me that I said, "What did you do with your stuff?" And he said, what I could, I gave away to people that I knew. And some of it, I just asked a friend or a family member to sell if they could. And if not, just, hey, it's yours. And I said, with your car? And he said, yeah, I threw the keys to a neighbor. And I said, if you could sell it, please do and send me the money. And if not, it's yours. I mean, that's unbelievable to me to think that happened to every one of their possessions. And they're not going back to get it. And I think we have to be understanding of why they're in the position they are.
It is mind-boggling to me to be afraid of somebody that needs help. It doesn't correspond with my Christian values. If somebody needs help, you help. And so, for those that are concerned or worried about, Afghan refugees coming to their corner of the United States, the only message that I really have is, be grateful that your kids will get to have an experience growing up next to kids that are seeing our culture and our world for the first time, that help us, not take for granted all of the things that we have, and also to appreciate the things that are different about, every single one of us, and the things that we see and the things that they care about. This is all opportunity to be a better America.
For Matt and Rick, this mission has reinforced the importance of welcoming immigrants to our communities.
We want people, in my opinion, who want to be here and want to be Americans. And, I think our culture and their culture can grow together to make it a way better place for my kids. And so I've certainly always believed in the value of immigration and have always been very strongly against fear of the unknown, because America is just this really great experiment. And I think anything you know about experiments is you don't always know the outcome. And so fear of the unknown is just not an American value, in my opinion.
I know for sure that I've had arguments in the past where I said, we shouldn't let anybody in unless they go through the legal process. And then as I go and see what that looks like, I completely realized that I was wrong on that, and that I was given the geographic lottery ticket when I was born here. I recognize that. I fully understand that. Other people are just trying to get those things that we already talked about, those basic things that we all want: peace, prosperity, a chance to live a life where they're free from exactly what's happening in Kabul right now. Why not let more people experience this? This is, if the whole world was feeling prosperous and feeling safe and secure, we wouldn't have any of these problems at all. And they just want a little piece of that. And, I feel like we have a really negative view of so many immigrants, and it's so wrong. They're so much more like us than we realize. They want the same things. And it saddens me to think that, even when a lot of our friends do get here, and we're going to support that as long as we can until it gets done. But even when they do get here, they're going to have those faces in the crowd that look at them and judge them and are afraid of them and think that they're going to be the next 9/11 terrorist. And it's so far from the truth. These are people that have, in all of these cases, the people that are going to get to come eventually here and be resettled here, they've all been more vetted than my American friends. Their lives have been dug into over and over and over again before we ever put a uniform on them or before we ever put them on a bench or allowed them to be in, working for USAID or whatever they did. Before that ever occurred, their entire life was combed through very, very finely. And then it's going to be done again before they're ever allowed to be here. How many Americans do we know that went through that? They didn't. They were just born here. So let's also kind of take a step back and look at this for a second. Their lives are already being dug into. If they're going to get to this point, like Rick said, the fact the terrorists slipping through in large, that's not happening. Come on, really? If that's happening, then our government is really, really bad, and we've got bigger problems than any of us realize because they can't find that. We have to be more open. We have to be more accepting. And honestly, it's not just about immigration. This is a lesson for us as a nation. We need to be more open-minded. We need to come together more. And we need to start working as a more cohesive unit overall.
Matt and Rick are committed to continuing this mission. And that to them is about honor and healing.
Rick talked about revisiting old wounds. It wasn't just like revisiting it. It was like just ripping every scab straight off. And it's like, oh, hey, we're back. Try to put that away for 10 years. And then all of a sudden it's back, and it's back in a big way. I think I've realized that I am going to have to talk to my kids about it. My oldest son understands a little bit about what we've done just because he's seen some, articles and things like that. But he's going to get to a point where I'm going to have to talk a little bit about it. But I think we're going to talk about it from a human rights standpoint. Like, look at this. We need to learn from this. This lesson should have been learned many times before, but here we are again. And I think if nothing else, it's going to help me to raise a more empathetic and caring, responsible human being that frankly cares about human life, because it's just so much out there that is the opposite of that.
To me, as a veteran, I feel like I have a moral obligation, specifically to these interpreters and their families. When we see what's going on, what's happening, and there's certainly the argument to be made that there was no good way to leave Afghanistan. And there's a lot of blame in the rearview mirror. Is Afghanistan a better place after a 20-year U.S. occupation than it was, 20 years ago? I don't know. I just know that some folks that fought alongside me, that I was able to come home and have 2 kids and an amazing family and live a really good American dream. I deserve just as much as me to have that right and ability. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that, some that did make it out of Afghanistan have that opportunity and have that opportunity to get their story told. And the folks that are still in Afghanistan, we're going to keep working to get them out, and we're going to keep working to keep them safe. And can't do it the way we did in our younger years. I don't have that skill set anymore, but I'm a little older, a little wiser, and still pretty resourceful.
There's just so many people that supported this mission, and they need support all over the world. And there are a lot of them in our backyards now. And the best way we can honor, or maybe the only way we can honor this failed mission, is to make something right of it. And one way we can do that is to honor these people, to help them get on their feet, to help them live a life. Or else, what the hell was all of it for?
Rick Stockberger is a U.S. Army veteran and the president and CEO of Bright Energy Innovators. Matt Carpenter is a former infantryman and combat advisor to the Afghan National Army. He's currently a middle school teacher in Wadsworth, Ohio. You can learn more about their work and listen to the full conversation we had with them on our website, immigrationforum.org/podcast. Trust me, the full conversation is incredible. Now, if you like what you hear, subscribe to Only in America wherever you are listening to this episode. Only in America is produced and edited by Katie Lutz, Joanna Taylor, and Becca Wall. Our artwork and graphics are designed by Carla Leha. I'm Ali Narani, and I will talk to you next week.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, supporting innovations in education, democratic engagement, and strengthening international peace and security. And from Humanity United. When humanity is united, we can bring a powerful force for human dignity.